Hey everybody, finally back to work on the project. The Lockheed Vega Gilmore Oil Roscoe Turner project. Anyway, working away on this again, back at it. After a hiatus, had kind of a job going for a little while. Now the election is over with, pretty much so is the job, until the next one, which is coming up in a few months. Anyway, current progress, and it's been a while. This is the state of our engine at this point. Push rods are installed. The ignition harness I've started on. Got the ring around the crankcase here, behind the push rods. Again, this will all be painted. It's unpainted so far. These are the colors that everything was molded in. For the ignition harness ring, I just used evergreen plastics, styrene rod, solid rod. It's just plastic. Okay. Plastic rod comes in this length. Anyway, I don't know which diameter that is because I tossed the package after I emptied it. And I don't typically do that, but I did in this case. So anyway, just whatever diameter looks right, feels right, smells right, is right. So that's what we did. Anyway, that's the this is where the motor sits at this point. So that's that. The vacuum form motor, the motor that was part of the cowling, which then I cut it out because I had wanted to have the cowling removable, have the engine installed on the fuselage, and have the cowling slip on and off, but it just doesn't fit. You can see that's just never going to go in there. It's fine up at the front end, you know, it's perfect. It would fit. It would be a nice snug fit right inside the ring. But you can't get there from here, and I didn't want to slice this all up, try to hinge it or any of that stuff. So we're going to leave this intact. We're going to have this mount to the fuselage firewall by use of the magnet and this steel washer. And then when I want the cowling, I'll just pop that off, and then we'll slide this onto the fuselage. And again, this engine is, I'm in the process of detailing it up. So it'll have all of the push rods, and for the push rods I'm just using Q-tip. This one's dirty, I've been using it for something else. Actually, this is to me a panel accentuator. I was using this on a different model, and this is kind of the thing I used to mop up the excess. Anyway, I digress. But I use the shafts of these, the sticks, if you will, for these. They're just the right diameter. They're pretty cheap and disposable. I don't know how many Q-tips. I think it was $2 or $3 for 1,000 Q-tips, something like that. So it's a pretty inexpensive way to go. And it looks like they're about the right size. So I've got a bag of these here somewhere. Here. So we'll just cut them up, and I'll save the ends because I can use them even on a short stick. You know, this is still a usable Q-tip. It just doesn't have the longer shaft on it anymore. Anyway, prattling on it. And when this is finished, you see I've already drilled it out for the ignition wiring. So once the wires are installed, all the push rods are installed. We'll paint this and detail it, finish it up with the paint, and then it'll just install. Actually, it'll be installed from the back. It'll go in from the back. We'll just fit it in there as best we can. Put a little bit of putty around the edge here, sand that up smooth and flush, and away we go. So when the time comes, we'll have two engine options, either with the cowl or without the cowl. That was the plan all along. So at any rate, you can see the wing is being infilled now. I'm just in the process of doing that work. So I'm on the top wing, top of the wing here. I started with the underwing center, but then what I wanted to do is reinforce the upper wing, meaning I wanted to glue both around the perimeter of the outside, but also want to be able to lay a bead around the inside. So that's why I'm doing it this way. This gives me full access so that in here all of these leading edge pieces will have adhesive on both sides, top and underside, as will the center section here. When I go to put on the upper center section, I should be able to apply glue along the spars as I go, so that even the center section will be glued above and below. And that way, again, we want to prevent that push-through situation that can come up if there's not enough adhesive on our infill pieces. So anyway, that's just a little insight to how we're doing that. Also, because this wing is a cantilevered and has no struts, has no wire supports, has no and because it's going to be a parasol wing, in other words, it's not going to be fixed onto the fuselage. It's actually going to be sitting up off of the fuselage on these short struts. I want to make sure the wing is really strong, because that's probably how the airplane or the model will be picked up from time to time, is by the wing. And if that's going to happen, then I want to make sure these are doubly reinforced and strong into the, yada yada. So that's where we are. The fuselage is here. So there's still a bit of sanding to be done on this. I added a few details to the firewall. We'll add a little bit more as we go along. You can see the magnet recessed here. The circle I drew on for reference, that's about where the engine backplate is. So if we stay outside of that with our parts, the engine will continue to fit on there. And you can see that it does. It just fits in there, nice and snug. And this is the status of our Lockheed Vega at this point. So I am back at it. It's been a little while. I let it lapse for a while. I was dealing with I had a cold. I don't know what cold it was. It might have been the thing. There was no way to test it, and until there is a way to test the antibodies, I won't know if that's what I had. But I had something. Lost my sense of smell and had a fever for a day or two and loss of appetite. I was afflicted more with the intestinal part of it, that aspect of it, the irregularity, and then the low fever and sort of a complete loss of the sense of smell for a few days, loss of appetite and all that. And so at any rate, we're in the what's the date today? COVIDia the 19th, I think it is. Anyway, every day's the same. We're all at home, doing what we're doing. Fortunately, I have this wonderful pastime to keep me preoccupied or occupied or otherwise engaged. What else? I'm gonna do some work on this thing. May leave the camera on, just do a little bit of infill here. Just kind of remind everybody of how we do this. So anyway, I got the leading edge strip cut. It's just rough cut. It's actually the leftover portion. What's left over after cutting these two strips off of our plank. This is the plank that we were working with. This is the plank for this side. So this one's going to be cut up in strips. You see there's a little bit of a remainder there. That's just, the best we could do between what we needed and what our stock is available in 4-inch width. So, all right, so I've got the leading edges marked here. You just see these X's on here pretty faintly, but there they are. X's marks the leading edge. And again, that helps me keep everything oriented as I go down the line here. So we just cut off the front end piece here. Now we're working on section 2. And so we're just marked top and bottom. Again, we're going to brace this against this wing former and rib or former or whatever you want to call it. And then we're just going to mark where we're going to make our cut. Alright, then reestablish the X for the leading edge. And slice this off with our sharp number 11 X-Acto. Well, maybe it's not so sharp. I've been at this for a little while, so it might not be as sharp as it was. Okay, so now we just want to kind of line this up here. You can see we need to take a little bit off the width. Length is good, but the width is a little much. So we're just going to mark it here along where that stringer is, where the stringer runs underneath our piece. We just want to make that mark there. And slice that off. And cut it pretty close. Maybe leave it a hair long. Hit it with the sanding block for a second. See how that does. That's a little heavy still, so we're just gonna run that twice or 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Clear the ends. Again, when you're sanding those edges, you don't want to sand into the part. Now you can see we got a pretty good fit there. So we're going to soak that in our water over here for a minute, make it pliable. This is what I use to kind of shape the pieces when there's a radius to them. That way I don't have to cut extra stringers and make our pieces really small and quadruple the amount of work I'm doing when I cut these. This way I can keep the pieces pretty large, but I can achieve those radiuses and not have a lot of flat spots. And if you know what I'm talking about, then you know what I mean. Once you get into doing this kind of work, if you decide to do it, you'll see that the trick is to prevent flat spots, is to when a surface is radius, that you manage that radius, you manage to achieve that radius. And using flat pieces of infill on rounded sections of fuselage, you can end up with some flat spots. So you want to round these pieces. You want to radius them so that they match these radiuses here, and that's kind of what we're doing now. So use a little water. Use a little piece of dowel. I have dowels in various diameters depending on what I need to do, and that's how I like to get there from here. And that way we don't have, see, I'm gluing this both on the outside of the wing and underneath inside the wing. You just wipe away the excess with your finger. We don't have to be we don't have to be neat here. Everything's going to be sanded, rigorously sanded. So, but we do want to make sure that we've got a good solid glue adhesion even after these parts are sanded down. So that means gluing it on top and bottom. So this is, again, this is how we do our infill. Got to be able to see that wing rib on the nose there. I hope everybody's well and following the health guidelines, maintaining, your personal space and your self-quarantine if you're in that situation. as best you can. You know, it's important not just for ourselves, but for the people that are around us. You guys know that stuff. I don't have to lecture. Probably shouldn't even speak about it. Everybody knows what the shape we're in is, what we're against here. And you all know what you need to do. But I do want everybody to be careful. Be safe. Yeah, it's a pretty good fit. I'm going to take a little bit more. It doesn't need to be tight. It just needs to fit. It can even be a little bit loose going in. That's not optimal, but if you're too tight and you're putting pressure either on the leading edge or on the other stringers and spars, and you're bowing out the ribs a little bit, that's not good. You really want to avoid all that. So, I mean, just right is perfect, obviously, but if it's a little small, it's probably a better bet than if it's a little large. The adhesive will fill. The filler will fill. Sanding will fill. And if you need to go back and apply more glue over the top, then so be it. Anyway, you want a nice fit, but you don't want to be putting pressure on the other parts. And we get our glue, especially along that leading edge. And then we'll do the outside. And you really let that run into the gap for a minute. The glue is going to, through capillary action, it's going to get into that wood, seep into the gap, which is what you want. If you put it on and wipe it off immediately, then you lose that feature. You want to let that happen for a second or two and then wipe it. And again, you don't need to worry about any glue buildup really, because you're going to sand it. The problem comes up when the adhesive sands differently than the wood. It's a little bit, you can end up with a little bit of unevenness there. So that's why I do like to wipe it away, but I do like to give it a second to get into the gaps and then do it. Underneath, you don't have to do anything